The gameplay feature premiere is about to begin, which means so is our recap, summary, breakdown, kind of thought video going over it.
With a new episode,
bro, this hurts my ears.
Up,
So the first new feature that they're talking about is fielding within custom practice. Now you're able to create scenarios, practice the same fielding situations over and over. You know, if you're a catcher in Road to the Show, you want to practice that. You could have like a bunt in front of the catcher. You got to throw to first. You can have the same situations and everything. So fielding is new for gameplay. You can now practice fielding in custom practice mode. That's pretty cool. This is what I feel like I would personally use the fielding practice for, robbing home runs, because I suck at it. I don't know what it is, but when they changed from that little circle thing on the ground to this, I haven't been able to rob home runs anymore. I had no problem in the past timing it up, but for some reason, I just can't get this down. So if I'm going to use the custom fielding practice for anything, it will be robbing home runs, because I'm stupid. I have no idea how to I've robbed home runs before, but like consistently robbing them with this new arrow thing, I just can't do it. So that's actually that's a good thinking right there. Second new feature here this year is the new difficulties, amateur and minor. It looks like those are between beginner and rookie, so there was probably a pretty big gap in between beginner and rookie, and now they've added amateur as well as minors in between those, just to try to make it easier for people to get into the game, learn the game, and not feel like it's too hard for them. So that's always awesome. And same thing with fielding, right? The more features that they add, even if it's not something I'm personally going to use or use a ton, I feel like the more stuff they add to the game, the better. I feel like there's almost never a downside to adding more features, if that makes sense. So what they're going over right now is new to MLB 22 is the dynamic PCI. The PCI is now dynamic. The further away from the strike zone you are, as you can see, the PCI is shrinking. So when you're in the zone, I think it's the same size all over, but when you get out of the zone, it shrinks. So they're allowing us to reach all areas of the zone and right outside it, but if you're swinging at a pitch outside of the zone, it's going to be harder to make good contact, which I love. If they're not going to make it so the PCI can't go onto the strike zone, which is what I probably stupidly want, I'm not just as happy, but I would say I'm pretty happy with this fix. I feel like making the PCI smaller when it's out of the zone, I feel like that's a good compromise and a good solution. So right now they're kind of talking about swings and everything, as well as the dynamic PCI. They're showing off some Chase Utley gameplay, the PCI anchor a little bit. That's a new feature this year where there's 9 little dots, and by pressing down the left thumbstick when you're on one of those dots, you can anchor your PCI. So instead of it normally being anchored in the middle, you could anchor it in any one of those little dots, and say your opponent keeps throwing high inside fastballs, you could anchor your PCI there, so you start there, so it's maybe a little bit easier for you to hit. And then for swings, he was just talking about, and this is how it's been for a while, they have like, I think he said 9 different swings. So everybody's swing is relatively the same depending on the type of player, whether I think they're a pull, push hitter, maybe power hitter, stuff like that. But there's 9 different swings that could be provided to a player. They're going to have one of them, I think he said, and based on that swing, certain pitches I think will have different results with timings and stuff like that. And that's where the PCI anchor could come in handy. If you kind of realize what type of swing a player has and where your opponent's throwing, you can kind of combine all that to hopefully have the best results. And one thing to keep in mind with the dynamic PCI, and they're mentioning this now, with it being smaller out of the zone, that's going to result in less foul balls. Because the PCI and the outer PCI is shrinking when you go out of the zone, it's going to make it harder to make contact. So we're hopefully, because of that, going to be seeing a lot less foul balls. So I love that. I really, really like that. And I think that's probably my #1 reason to like the dynamic PCI, is the fact that it's going to hopefully finally put a limit on the amount of foul balls we've seen, because I feel like it's been crazy for a long time. So they just mentioned that contact swings and power swings have been updated. The feature got added about 10 years ago, mainly with offline gameplay, right? And they haven't changed it, except last year they patched in some changes for contact swings, but this year they changed it even more for those contact and power swings. Contact swings will have less exit velocity because they had a lot of exit velo last year, so they're going to have a lot less exit velocity, and contact swings are now going to be best used in 2-strike counts when you want to extend the at-bat, try to foul off pitches, and on pitches out of the zone, they're going to not work as well. So that's another thing, just like the dynamic PCI. Even though contact swings will still work to extend at-bats, it's not going to be as easy as in the past. And then power swings, it seems like it should work a little bit more well than it has, where you're going to be getting more gap shots and more home runs if you're actually power swinging, because that hasn't really been the case. It's just mainly been resulting in the highest possible exit velocities. That's kind of what it sounds sounded like they were saying that it's now going to actually have better results if you're making that good contact with good timing on the PCI that's shrunk with a power swing. In my opinion, they need to change this where if you're swinging at an inside pitch, good timing is different for if that same speed pitch was on the outer part of the plate. I feel like that's how it needs to be. I don't think they should have you swing earlier or later. I think they kind of should, but I think it should still have good timing, right? I think if you're inside, perfect on a 93 fastball like that should be different timing than perfect on an outside fastball, if that makes sense. I feel like that would be a better way to do it than telling us that we need to swing earlier if we're inside or later outside. That just seems a little bit backwards to me. Maybe that's how it works, I don't know, but that's just not what I got from what they showed and what they were saying. It seems like you don't want perfect timing. It seems like you want to be early on inside pitches instead, is how they made it sound, which doesn't seem like that should be the case to me. But now this makes it seem like it does work the way with that green little area in the swing feedback, right? That to me indicates good timing because of the things they have in the swing analysis. So to me, this makes it seem like it works how I feel like it should. So maybe I'm just misunderstanding what they're saying a little bit. So with the hitting right now, what I'm hearing from them is that hitting is, as far as I can tell, exactly the same as last year, as MLB The Show 21. Good timings, perfect, everything like that. Hitting engine entirely the same. It doesn't seem like they've changed anything, at least from what I've heard or can tell so far. What's different is we have, you know, the dynamic PCI shrinking. They changed contact and power swing and stuff like that. So that's changing a little bit, but it seems like everything else is the same in terms of the hitting engine. Nothing has really changed with it. And what we're seeing now in this gameplay feature premiere is just kind of them explaining to us why stuff works the way it does with exit velocities, timing, stuff like that. So instead of telling us that they've changed stuff, I think they're just kind of explaining how the game worked last year and why that will be working the exact same in 22 is kind of the vibe I'm getting. I'm pretty sure they're saying that you can be early on an outside pitch and it could go foul, like the other way, which doesn't make sense to me. I feel like if you're early, it should be fair, right? I feel like if you have good timing, it should be fair. Like what they're saying, I get why they're saying it. They're trying to explain why things work the way they do. But in my opinion, it shouldn't work that way. It just like, it doesn't make sense. I feel like if the game's telling me I have good timing, it should be good timing. It shouldn't be going foul one way or the other depending on the pitch location. I feel like that's got to adjust with the feedback. I feel like if it's telling me my timing was good, the ball should not be going way foul, and I'm just kind of confused on why it works the way it does. So I think that's all for hitting. They spent about 25 minutes on it from the feature premiere, and it seems like the new things are they've changed contact and power swings, but they recommend pretty much only using normal swings except in extreme situations. And then they've also added the PCI anchor as well as dynamic PCI, so it shrinks outside the zone. And now we're on to pitching. We have the dynamic par, so that perfect accuracy region, and it's not inside the circle, by the way. I was confused on that for the longest time. It's anywhere touching the circle, so the ball could be touching just very slightly, like a hair of it could be touching that edge of the circle, so that's something to keep in mind. But par is now dynamic this year, where the higher you're throwing a pitch, the bigger the par is going to be, which makes it so it's going to be harder to get a accurate pitch on a higher pitch. And I think that's going to be mainly for like high inside sinkers, stuff like that. Obviously it's going to be on breaking balls too, but I think we're going to notice this the most on sinkers and fastballs high in the zone, is kind of what they seem to be showing right here, is that par being dynamic this year, getting bigger the higher you are in the zone. So I am welcoming that feature. I like this feature. Sometimes though, it seems like it's too hard to throw a pitch even with a perfect release in the spot that I want it, and I would almost rather have it be harder to get a perfect release and have the par be smaller than make the par bigger but don't change how hard it is to get a perfect release. So I like this change, but I don't think this is the way that I would have changed making it harder to hit spots and everything like that personally. Yeah, just to confirm, this is for every pitch. I hope I didn't make it confusing when I said sinkers and stuff. This is for every single pitch, breaking balls, sinkers, fastballs, whatever. Every pitch will have this dynamic par where it's bigger higher in the zone and smaller lower in the zone. Actually, literally, here is a chart so we know exactly what pitches it does and does not impact. It doesn't impact a 4-seam fastball, 2-seam fastball, and cutter, but it impacts literally every other pitch. So that's pretty cool that they're showing that. So they made some outlier changes. That's pretty cool. So it seems like that is all for hitting and pitching. So for pitching, we didn't get as much as hitting, and it seems like it's pretty much just the par being dynamic now, getting bigger, higher in the zone for all except those 3 pitches. And then it also seems like they worked on outlier a little bit to make it not as overpowered. Then they've made some changes to the pitching styles as well. Pinpoint pitching, it's easier for off-speed gesture accuracy and harder for fastball gesture accuracy. So it's easier to get perfects on off-speed pitches and harder to get them on fastballs is what I'm kind of reading from this. Real quick, I just saw what the outlier changes were. Basically, for outlier, it is going to be less fast than it was in 21. It's not going to be as fast. And then it's also going to be harder to locate those pitches if that pitcher has outlier on them. So now we're going to move on to fielding. We're done with hitting and pitching. Ramon just said that apparently there's a lot of kind of changes that got coded into the game for hitting and pitching just to overall make it a better game that they're not talking about, which kind of scares me a little bit because I would like to know everything that's changed, but apparently there's more changes that they just didn't talk about. This might be my favorite fielding change, update, whatever you want to call it, is the perfect throw to every base. Playing with that in the tech test, it was huge, and I love that that's a new feature. Instead of just having that perfect throw home ability, now you have a perfect throw to any base ability. I love it. One thing that I love, they just mentioned, the perfect throw marker gets bigger or smaller depending on the player's arm accuracy. So if you have someone with 99 arm accuracy, it's going to be bigger than if you have someone with like 50 arm accuracy. So I love that. One thing to keep in mind that they just mentioned, a couple things. So number one is that fielding attributes do matter. If a player's a better fielder, then they're going to be able to get rid of the ball quicker. So that's an advantage to using somebody who's a better fielder over someone who's not. If you see someone with like a diamond shield under him in the field, they're going to get the ball out quicker than somebody with a bronze, silver, gold shield. So that's pretty cool. I like that attributes actually do matter to an extent, and you know, maybe makes you consider using someone with better fielding. And then the second thing they mentioned is that preloaded throws are the best throws. So if you're able to preload your throw, apparently it's going to be the best. I feel like almost all throws have to be preloaded, so I don't know if I fully understand that, but it's what they said. So they just clarified it because I was confused too, and I guess maybe they thought we were as well. But pretty much the earlier you preload a throw, the better animation you're going to get. So if you preload your throw right away, like you know it's to the third, you preload your throw to second right away or whatever, the earlier you preload it, the better animation and quicker animation for that throw you're going to be getting. Just like every year, currently they're talking about how they've added a lot of animations just to make the game smoother, look more realistic, overall just be better, because they add new throw animations, new catch animations, fielding animations, just for plays to happen that weren't possible, that didn't make sense, and it just makes everything smoother and overall makes the gameplay a better experience when you have more animations, because you're going to have more animations that fit scenarios that weren't there before. This is huge. So instead of seeing that Olay on the corners at third and first base, now they've added a lot more knockdown animations. So you're still going to see the Olay every now and then like we did there, and I think it's going to matter on how good of a fielder that player is. You know, if it's diamond shield, bronze shield, whatever. But there's going to be a lot more knockdown animations, so you don't see that Olay like we just saw right there as often. Now you're going to see the fielders getting in front of the ball more, knocking it down, and potentially, especially if the runner's slower, having a chance to get him out still after knocking the ball down, rather than only having the Olay. Like right there, he's able to pick and scoop it. That was not a thing in the past. So that's huge. Even though it's a small change, adding those animations is a big change. And here's just kind of a recap of what they talked about in this feature premiere, the gameplay updates coming to MLB 22, and then they also mentioned, and I mentioned earlier, that that's not everything that's changed. They've changed some stuff, but there's just stuff that they haven't told us that I'm sure we'll find out once we actually get our hands on the game and play it a little bit more. So that's going to be it for this feature premiere, and I don't know if I'm super happy with it. Like, I'm happy with a lot of the changes they talked about, but with the length of the feature premiere, they said it was going to be about an hour or whatever. I think I just got my expectations up a little bit too high. I think I was expecting a little bit more, and I feel like I kind of got the vibe that there's these new features like the dynamic PCI par, some animations, stuff like that, perfect throws home, but overall gameplay is pretty much going to be the same. But there should be less extremities and extremes like foul balls and stuff like that due to these new features. But overall, the gameplay, to me, the vibe I got, is going to be pretty much like 21, just these new features to limit certain things and change it a little bit.